That night, I couldn't sleep. I was dead tired after working for 13 hours straight, but I just couldn't grab any sleep. I was only constantly thinking about Rashmi Akka. She simply would not go out of my mind. I lost my father when I was young. I haven't seen my mother and 3 sisters since I was 14. When I came here, Rashmi Akka took care of me like a mother, correcting my mistakes and showing me love. But now she's gone. She took her own life. The ID in charge snatched her phone, took away the memory card and SIM card. He shared her personal stuff with others in the factory, made fun of her. Some also took photos of her and other women workers going to the restroom, right in front of the welfare officer. This went on for 6 months. She was unable to work well, always looking worried and lost. Finally, it felt like she had no choice. I don't know when this will end. I'm really scared right now. All I want is to go back home. I miss my village and my baby goat Munmun. When I was 14 years old, 2 strangers came to our house. One was from our village and the other one was a well-dressed man. They spoke to my mother about a government scheme. My mother called me over, showed me the letter and asked if I wanted to join. That night we stayed up, dreaming about what we could do if I started earning for the family. I wanted to stay and continue going to school, but I had to choose to earn and support my family instead. After a few days, a jeep pulled outside my house. In the jeep were girls of my age, all heading to the factory. It was a big factory with lots of machines and people, including young girls like us. There were about 60 of us, all aged 12 to 14. They put us in small rooms, 10 by 10 feet, without beds, 6 girls in a room. They called it a hostel. The warden woke us up at 5:30 a.m. every day. We were served only idli and dosa for both lunch and dinner, and portions were small. Our task was to make 3 fabric rolls each day. Work started at 6:30 a.m. with a brief break from 12 to 12:30 p.m. and continued until 7:30 p.m. This routine was the same every day. They promised to pay us between 175 to 250 rupees per day. If we worked an extra 4 hours of overtime, we only received 50 rupees more. One fabric roll would take around 3 to 4 hours to complete, and I had to stand and keep watching the needle the entire time. Most of our supervisors were men who would verbally abuse us for the smallest mistakes. The work was very tiring, and it became even harder when we were on our periods. Nobody listened to us. They said our period pain was just an excuse not to work. There was no medication available, and nobody was allowed to go to the hospital unless they were severely ill. We couldn't leave the job without permission, and the contractor had to confirm if someone was really sick. We hardly ever got leaves. After 1 year at the hostel, I faced many health issues due to the poor diet and polluted environment. My hemoglobin levels dropped. I lost weight and I felt tired all the time. We had no proof of working at the factory, just an identity card to live in the hostel. When outsiders came to inspect, we would lie about our age and say we were over 18 years old. The contractor would create fake Aadhaar cards to show us as adults. Sometimes during audits or when foreign visitors came, the company would send us to a different place. After the visitors left, we would come back to work the next day. There were no records of us in the official books. I missed my family terribly and wanted to go home, but I knew our financial situation was tough, so I decided to stay and keep working. The garment and textile business in the south hires young girls like me for 2 reasons. First, compared to adults, we are less demanding when it comes to pay. We work hard, take fewer leaves and can produce faster within the given time. Second, the high rates of illiteracy, ignorance, poverty and helplessness among families from extremely underdeveloped and marginalized sections in the state leave us with no choice but to take these jobs. From the outside, these firms look fancy and attractive. However, once inside, it's a large dark space. You wouldn't know whether it was night or day because there aren't even windows to let in natural light. One night, I woke up and saw the factory owner leaving one of my female hostel mates' rooms. My friend and I were only about 13 to 14 years old, and we were terrified. We thought if he could do such things with an adult, he might do the same to us. Every night I would hear someone crying or sobbing. It seemed like every other female worker had a painful story. Veera Akka, a 38-year-old single mother, was sexually harassed by the manager, Abhinash. He never missed a chance to make sexually inappropriate remarks about her breasts and brassiere. When she complained, no action was taken against Abhinash. Instead, she faced further harassment because she belonged to the Dalit community, one of India's most discriminated and marginalized castes. She was ridiculed and insulted in front of the entire staff for taking a 2-day leave in 2018 to visit her hometown. As punishment, she was made to stand in one corner for 2 consecutive days. She wasn't even allowed to go to the washroom alone. The manager sent someone to wait outside the toilet and escort her back to her spot. When the matter reached the Internal Complaints Committee and the Garment Labour Union, Veera was transferred from the tailor department to the R&D department to hush up the issue. There, she faced further isolation, seclusion and discrimination for being a Dalit single mother. The male seniors warned all of us not to talk to her, help her or sit with her at the same table during lunch breaks. She was helpless and had no choice but to work there because she was her family's only breadwinner. Similarly, Kavita ma'am, a 42-year-old tailor at the factory, also belonged to the Dalit community. She suffered from recurring urinary tract infections and an irregular, painful menstrual cycle due to holding in urine for 2 to 4 hours every day. She couldn't take a toilet break to meet the target of cutting 120 pieces each hour, or else she would face a wage cut or termination. There were thousands of workers who only got 2 scheduled breaks, 10 minutes for tea and 20 minutes for lunch. These breaks were often wasted fighting for a turn to use the restroom. As a result, many female workers frequently skipped meals and restroom breaks to meet the quotas. Even after working in such conditions, factory owners would cut their wages, pay them less or not pay them at all. Nandini, aged 48, was paid 5 rupees less per day than the other 13 female tailors as a punishment for refusing to resign despite repeated warnings from management. Her fault was that she complained to the police about their persistent mistreatment. When nothing worked out, she contacted the State Worker Union, and in 2020 she was finally paid equally with others. Despite this, her monthly salary is as low as €138. After 8 years of back-breaking 8 to 9 hour shifts while standing in one position, with a €15 or Rs 1500 deduction for employee state insurance and provident fund, the government's mandated social security plan. The managers would ask for sexual favors from female workers in exchange for a wage increase, and those who gave in to their demands got the raise. It is an unsafe environment. Today's minimum wage in the state of Tamil Nadu is Rs 11,500, which is insufficient, and inflation is making it difficult for workers to feed their families. This is my story and the story of most female garment workers in India's $100 billion garment export industry. Our country is world's second largest exporter of textiles, employing 51 million people formally and 68 million people informally. We don't even know the brands we are making garments for, but we know these clothes are sold in Europe. While making these clothes, we face sexual harassment, isolation, poor working conditions, verbal abuse, manhandling, forced termination, wage theft, and caste-based harassment. Over 2,000 cases of gender-based violence and harassment were reported among Indian garment workers in production units of European brands such as C&A, H&M, Esprit, Decathlon, Lindex, Zara, Marks & Spencer, and Benetton during and after the COVID-19 outbreak. In the global apparel supply chains, over 70% of women endure sexual harassment, isolation, verbal abuse, manhandling, wage theft, and caste-based harassment. In Tamil Nadu, Child labor surged by 280% during COVID-19 pandemic, particularly affecting vulnerable communities like scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, as reported by Campaign Against Child Labor, CACL. The workforce in this industry is 90% female, yet all senior positions such as managers and supervisors are occupied by men. Many girls recruited for the textile industry as child laborers were recruited under fake Skill India programs and the now scrapped Sumangali scheme. While the women in the supply chain remain unaware of the brands their company produces for, European markets profit from low-cost production and low-wage labor with minimal accountability. The German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act seeks to address these disparities. Average monthly income for textile workers in India is €115 or Rs 10,441, far below the Asia Flow Income Alliance's calculated living wage of €375 or Rs 33,920, according to reports from the Garment and Textile Workers Union.